Welcome to the Every Gym podcast. I'm Andy Brady, joined in studio by the Honorable Dr. Pastor Jim Thomas. Honorable. Your grandfather was a judge, was he not?
He was a judge, yes.
I remember these things.
Absolutely.
And today we have a special guest, Pastor Jairo Campos. Welcome today. Today we're going to be learning from Jairo about our newest mission partner, Project 70 or Peace 70. Jairo, you're from Brazil, correct?
Yes.
All right, so first things first, are you a big Neymar fan?
A big what?
Neymar.
Neymar. Oh, Neymar. I'm sorry. Yes, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
Would you rank him above Ronaldinho or below him? I mean, obviously Pele probably first.
Yeah, they are at Pelé first. Yeah, sure.
Who would you put at number two?
Who? That's a tough. Garrincha is a, probably you don't know him, but
No.
he played with Pelé, who was a very good player.
Okay.
And Pele just passed away recently.
He did,
right?
yes. Neymar is very talented
Yeah,
player for sure. They are all good.
they're
Yeah.
all good. They're all
Brazilians.
Brazilian soccer players,
Yeah.
so they're all
We
good.
just need to win another World Cup.
That's fair.
That was funny. One of the last times we were down there, this is several years ago now, the World Cup was going on and they were selling jerseys. And they had the 6-star, because y'all won 5.
Yeah, we always.
And there was a
hope that-
6-star on the jersey
Let's go.
in anticipation that they were already going to win it. And then
Hexa.
they didn't win it. And so we have this like special
Oh, no.
artifact now
Yeah.
of something that never happened.
Yeah.
You know, so that was crazy.
Yeah, they always say we are going towards the Hexa championship.
Yeah.
Oh, the
Yeah.
sixth one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then in professional soccer or football in Brazil, Flamengo is the dominant soccer team, correct?
Don't talk about Flamengo. Man.
What? Could you explain
On
to
the
our audience why
other side of
Flamengo is the best?
I'm Vasco. You do this, right?
He told me. I asked him.
Yeah, no, Flamengo is bad.
Okay.
It's just for outcasts and people with no moral standards.
Isn't that who Jesus went after?
Yeah, I know.
So you're saying, who's your wife's favorite team?
It's my team. She's submissive to my.
Oh, is she? Oh, wow.
Soccer team.
So we're going there. I think
Okay.
Raquel's favorite team is Flamengo,
Well,
which gives
she's
her no moral
converting.
basis from what I just heard.
Okay.
And
She brought into the world 10 Vascaínos, 10 Vascos to the world. So she's figuring out that
all
she's
his
better.
children.
That's fair. And hello, I am Andy Brady, and this is the Every Gym podcast where I commit to you to never talk about soccer again. Jairo, can you tell our listeners and viewers just a little bit about your story and a little bit about your family?
Well, I grew up in a Christian family. My father was a Baptist pastor. He was a Portuguese national that migrated to Brazil in very young age. He was 16, I believe. And he was a Roman Catholic. He became a Christian. When he actually started dating my mom, she forced him to go to a Baptist church if he wanted to date her. And he actually became a believer, then a pastor. And we moved as a family to Portugal to do missionary work, and then France. And so I grew up in Europe for a good portion of my life. Then we came back to Brazil. I went to school, med school, became a surgeon, but always involved with church ministry, evangelism, music a lot, because my mom, she was a music major.
Okay.
And that was always this calling for, outdoor ministries, evangelism, not outdoor, outreach, right?
Outreach.
And yeah. And at some point in my life, I was very involved with the church, very passionate about, evangelism and music, of course. But I was growing fast on my professional, goals, I guess. So I became a surgeon, and I was really, in Brazil, we have a national contest for residency. So after I was a surgeon, I applied for that contest, or I went through the process and for urology.
Okay.
And I actually was second place in the national contest, and things seemed to be going very well. But actually, I was, had those 2 worlds struggling inside myself. And and one morning, it was a Sunday morning, I had to go to the hospital and to see all the patients. Everything was so packed. But I had to be in church, so I was there very, very early. But that Sunday was very, decisive for me because I got to church kind of late for the things I had to do. I in the parking lot, I ran through the deacon's foot, and I don't think it was a bad thing at all. Just kidding. It didn't hurt him, but so my world was coming to, a decision point, and so at that time, I started to make the move, the shift towards ministry, and it was a decisive year. That was 1999.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
When did you meet Raquel, your wife?
Well, we were teenagers, so we started dating very early.
And she has a medical background too, correct?
Yeah, to take care, animals like me. She's a veterinarian.
She's a veterinarian.
Yeah.
Nice. So it sounds like I think part of my personal story, which this is not about, but some of that resonates with me, that there was full devotion to growing in your walk with Christ, which included outreach and music ministry, and then a growing career. Am I hearing that right? And then there's kind of just a collision point that's occurring where one of those loves will win. Am I hearing that right?
Sure, yeah.
And it turns out it was the love for Christ and a call to ministry.
Yeah. And it's hard because, you put so much effort into that. I was probably 10 years in, on my formation and into that, and I was growing, but
yeah.
And I thought about my kids,
absolutely,
the financial thing and all that. So, but at the same time, I remember hearing the testimony of a doctor, a very renowned doctor in Brazil that was a Christian, but he was in a later phase in his life, and he would say that he regretted not answering the call when he was called, early on in his life. So here we are.
Yes, sir. So then you answer a call to ministry. How did Project 70 begin? Was it at that moment when you answered a call to ministry?
Well, it was starting, but I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know, we call it a project, but there's no project on our side. It's probably just recognizing that God had a project.
Yes, sir.
So in 1999, after, I was slowing down with my career, and I had the chance with our First Baptist Church in São João de Meriti, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. There was a small mission trip that the church will do to a very remote and needed area in Minas Gerais, a state in Brazil.
Okay.
And so because I was involved with evangelism, music, and the social ministry pastor, she asked me to go. And that was she asked me, we were actually just returning from vacation in Portugal. My parents were living in Portugal, and our 2 kids were born. And I said, man, I'm so busy with my schedule. I was still working as a surgeon. I dropped my progression, but I was still, I'm still, supporting my family and trying to find a balance. And so she asked me to go, and I felt so not able to manage my, my schedule. But at the same time, I felt really, I have to go. And believe it or not, I was from Rio, and Rio is, think about California in America. It's like inviting you to where? Kansas or a remote area, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been there before. It was new to me. So we went on a trip, and I saw a lot of need, poverty, a lot of communities with no infrastructure. Actually, there were regions, endemic regions for Chagas disease. That is a heart condition, and actually esophagus and rectus. They have this endemic disease there, and you were able to see that firsthand. Things that you only knew by seeing patients that came from those areas or in the books. now you were seeing kids getting, infected early on in their ages. We saw people in the churches, Baptist churches, that died in early age, from the heart condition. And so it was a world new to me. And we had a chance to be very intense about the preaching of the gospel and participating in the churches in those remote rural areas. And that was a life-changing experience. When I got back in the bus to go to Rio again, and it's like I was sobbing just by hearing the calling. And so I just went back to Rio, returned to the area. I'd say this is it, and so we gave everything away, our car, and then my wife and kids. We decided to go there, and we experienced the hardship of being someone in a mission field. Very remote, dirt roads. Everything is far apart. Like your car gets messed up with the bumpy dirt roads.
It's really bumpy, by the way.
Yeah,
Oklahoma roads.
Yeah, I mean, and you kind of felt the challenge. Logistics, transportation is a big thing in the mission field. Yeah. You don't realize that if you don't go there. But if you're out there, early on you're gonna learn. Having a nice car or a car that can take you somewhere. It's very important.
Yeah,
and things were different. My wife, she was used to have the wash and dryer at home. Over there, she had to
oh man,
wash dirt pants and shirts. That was really packed with. So it was kind of experience. And not too long after, I was still a doctor, and then there was an opportunity to come and study theology here at Southwestern, and but I came here and I said I'm in a mission. I'm really not here for the American dream. And so in the year 2001, while I was a student here at Southwestern, we started our first partnership with Baptist churches in this remote area in Minas Gerais. We call the Valley, Jequitinhonha Valley is like they used to call Poverty Valley. I really don't like that terminology, but it is, it was some municipalities were really they were very poor. But God was doing amazing things. So we started a partnership with one church to plant another church in a town that there was no church. At the end of the year, have another one. The next year, added 3 more. And all of a sudden, we were partnering with Baptist churches from here, from our local Brazilian ministry, and helping them to plant other churches in Brazil.
And all this was while you were in Fort Worth at Southwestern?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
At the same time, I was a student there.
Yes, sir.
And all of a sudden, by the year 2004 or 5, we went to Brazil with some of us, the Americans, and we went to just survey and meet the pastors that some of them were not even knew personally, and we realized just going on the road that all those signs for this city, that city, all of a sudden, this is where we're partnering with, this is it. And so along the road we saw there was a pattern, a geographic thing going on, and that was not intentional. It was it just happened. And I guess we realized that there was what the missiologists call a church planting movement. There was a fire to start new churches, and
how affirming, just driving down the road and seeing sign after sign of what maybe for some of your American partners was just the name of a town on a paper.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, we have a church in this village or in this town.
Exactly.
And now you're driving on a road and it's like, oh, we have a church there.
And now even fast forwarding this many years later, when we're in Brazil together, he'll go, no, that's the town we went to, and Pastor so-and-so is serving in that town now. And they birthed the church. And I mean, now it's not just the names of the towns, but it's the names of the churches and the pastors and the ones they've influenced. And you see that going beyond geographic location to relationships.
Yeah.
And that's what, of course, I never remember which one he's talking about, but because he knows them so intimately, unless we can connect an experience we had there with them. But it's phenomenal that it's gone past that to being brothers and sisters in Christ, and having those relationships and seeing those churches. And then the follow-up, how are they doing? Oh, they're healthy. and we're seeing growth in the little municipality or the little village next to it where there was nothing. And so that's exciting to me, is to see, even if you jump here 15, 20 years later, to see how that's gone from just a geographic conversation to a relational conversation too.
Wow.
And you have the team that has been built by those people and from those churches. Like when we do the mission trips, we have people from all those churches and around, and some of them we know very well from all those years.
That's right.
So it's pretty amazing to see that, towns that when you did the survey trip, right? In Santa Catarina, this is a different story, but just Jim, when, at some point he asked us to present.
When I went to Georgia,
Yeah.
and I was going to a new church from here in Texas, and I called Jairo and I basically said, hey, can we be a part of what's going on with P70 in Minas? And it was specifically Minas Gerais at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And God had been leading him through some conversations with people there to potentially expand to a secondary state.
Okay.
Whereas Minas Gerais, the kind of the main planting state that Project 70 started, is about the size of Texas.
Okay.
Okay, so we have to understand that Brazil is the size of the continental United States.
Yeah.
Right. So we think of Central American, South American countries as being really, really small, but Brazil is huge.
Yeah.
And so Minas is the size of Texas. Santa Catarina is about the size of Maine in the United States. And so to go for our church specifically to go and start that, we went down and did a vision trip and drove the entire state. Wow. 5 guys in a stinky van for 1,500 miles or whatever, and met with pastors and leaders throughout that state. So
Yeah, and some of the towns we didn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And a lot of them. So we just stopped the car.
prayed.
Sometimes not even step out of the car, it's just pray inside the van, right?
Yeah.
And what is amazing is to see, not too many years after, that you have a church there.
Yeah.
Now you go there in places that we had nobody to talk to, not, in a personal level. Now we have, members, church
right.
that and actually they are partners with, other projects and all that. So this is very fulfilling. You know?
Well, even to the point where I've been a part of this for 15, 17 years now, never knew the rural DNA that was birthed in Jairo until now, out of that sending on that mission trip from the church in Rio.
Yeah.
Because we're always asked, Project 70 is always asked to come to the main metropolitan areas. And there's some things we've done in Sao Paulo and some other places like that. But there have also been those stories of us going to a capital of a state and all of the pastors wanting us to come to the capital and us saying, no, we're going to go to the rest of the state.
Yeah.
And then you see the exponential multiplication of Baptist work through the proclamation of the gospel and making disciples and starting church plants beyond the capital city that had never happened before.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to the DNA that God planted in Pastor Jairo back on that first mission trip, to see the least of these in many people's minds as not worthy to go to, but now have become the center point of a movement in Brazil that didn't start in the big city.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's actually a big theological thing for us. And after you learn that, you see that it's actually very clear in the Bible. If you go to Matthew chapter 4, right? Jesus calling the disciples, or Jesus even starting his ministry. He didn't start in Jerusalem. It's there. If I was Jesus, I would start in Jerusalem. I mean, at least when back in the day, I'm going to go to, I don't know, Paris, London, New York, I'm going to have this big ministry, right? Because we think that that's the way to go, from the center to the periphery. But you see in the Bible, it started in Galilee. Galilee was nothing, it was a secondary place, and Jesus, actually it's Zebulun, how do you say that? Zebulun,
Naphtali.
Nobody remembers what are those, sons of Jacob in the list, right?
Till Christmas.
When
we
very
read the
remote.
Christmas text,
It's very remote. But God remember, those tribes, and he started a ministry. Jesus' ministry started there, secondary place, and then a secondary list of men, a secondary man, fishermen from Galilee. This was not Team A, right? It was not. You would, and I would probably go to Jerusalem and pick the best students, from Gamaliel's, and God did that with Paul, right?
Yeah, with Paul.
Sure.
But, here you have fishermen and just saying, follow me. You see the power in that? I mean, we don't pay attention to that, God is really, he sees the potential where we usually don't see it.
Well, it speaks to the universality of the gospel, that it's for everyone, and that you don't have to be a certain type of person, both to respond to the gospel, but for God to use you in a kingdom movement. And it's amazing. We have had professionals, dentists and lawyers and businessmen who have become church planters and given up those callings for a new calling. But we see one of the greatest things is, even when we're working in the north, what we would consider the north. I mean, we're not up to Amazonia. Most people think Brazil, they think the Amazon. This is way south of the Amazon, right? But we see believers from different states coming together that have never met one another on projects together, and now have brothers and sisters from at least three, probably four, including Sao Paulo.
Yeah, and Rio 5.
Rio 5, coming together in these two pretty small towns that we go to every year, and doing ministry as the body of Christ. And not only does it have impact on that town, it expands their vision of the kingdom. Right? And not just to be from Rio, which is the coolest place in Brazil to live. Quotes, if you're listening online. But from all over, from Santa Catarina, from the very deep south to up in Minas and Bahia above that. And so you see all of these believers coming together as one body. Doing the work of the kingdom, which is exciting.
Yeah, and they usually, if you ask them, they come from smaller towns, even in their own states. And that's kind of amazing because, when you're from the big city, and you guys are in Weatherford, I mean, you know a little bit of this, right? You're not totally in the Metroplex, so you know how usually, I heard that in my entire life, there's a need for missionaries in the south of Brazil. Santa Catarina, there's such a great need for, missionary work and all that. So we tend to think that we are the solution when you live in Rio or, live in Dallas. We need to save the world. And of course I preached this morning. So of course we have to do the work. But here's the thing. God is raising up leaders, and we need to trust that there's a lot of the good stuff is out there, And this is very important because if you don't do that, you may kill the whole process. If you come with a centralized mentality, sometimes the solution always have to come. We think the solution always have to come from the central office, in some sort of Baptist agency and this is not the way God works and the Holy Spirit works. And even in Matthew chapter 4, the end of the story is amazing because if you read the text, Galilee became the center of the whole world. People would come from Syria, from all places in Galilee, Nazareth, and also Jerusalem. People were going from Jerusalem to Galilee. You see the point? Where Jesus is where the center of the world is. And this is very important in the theology of missions and economy, because you forget that, you're going to flip things around and things might not work. You may, kill the whole process if you don't have the right mentality.
One of the things I've loved and learning from you, or one of the things I've loved that you've shared is P70 has an emphasis on using local Brazilian pastors to train up and serve in local Brazilian churches. Could you speak to maybe some of the burden behind ensuring that it's not, hey, we're importing from Europe or maybe even importing from Rio out to one of these other states, but finding the people that are present there and training and developing them to become leaders in their local church?
Yeah. Well, I guess the project is taking advantage of what has been done in the missionary world until now. So it's very smart in the sense of being a second wave, using the structures that we already have.
Gotcha.
And it's like we are not in the same page, when we first started doing international missions. There's a lot of things that happen, a lot of growth, and there's a structure out there. So it would make a lot of sense if you just take advantage of that. If you have a good, solid church, have, mature Christians, they're going to hear the calling. right?
Yeah.
And they'll be ready to go and be missionaries right in the next town, and why not, So if the church has that kind of human resource, the kingdom has that, you're willing to partner with them, this is a goal,
Yes.
it's a goal. And then you just, it's, can you see how many phases you just, cross over? I mean, you just leave behind because you don't need to send, you just think about an American missionary that goes to a small town in Minas Gerais. He has to learn the language. He has to be culturally adapted,
Yeah.
and he's going to be very expensive to keep because, of course, So it's a totally different scenario. So that's why we can expedite the kingdom growth a lot, And so later on, what we experienced is that we were having a lot of planters, a lot of leaders, and they were in need of a theological training. They were mature Christians, of course they've been in church all the time. They had the pastor to help them, but we really felt the need to prepare them in a theological way, and that was kind of crazy because I went to Southwestern and I say, I have a master's degree in New Testament, but who are we just to develop a seminary program? But ends up that it was another project, that God had in His mind, and that became a very strong. It was a success in the sense of we were able to train them really well, and because they were passionate about it, it's a total different thing to train pastors and students that really want to learn, and they're going to use that then the following Sunday. They are taking notes because they need a sermon, or two sermon. So it's really, it's a different classroom. Yeah.
Well, and it's important to understand the strategy behind P70. We always, at least I used to always call it the three-pronged stool, right? We had pastor support of local indigenous pastors. You had seminary support of helping these pastors grow in their theological education, and then passing that on to the next generation, both at a associate's, bachelor's, and master's level, right?
Yeah, the main course is the seminary, the bachelor's
level.
We started the master just to train the professor for the bachelor's, and the associate became a program for women and young men and men who don't want to be pastors but want to be ministers or evangelists or missionaries,
but to have some theological
Absolutely.
underpinnings to their lay ministry in the church, if you will.
Yeah.
The third leg then becomes the mission trip and the partnerships of bringing American churches in to partner with them to sustain the whole chair, both with manpower, with finances, with encouragement. All of those things are so critically important. But the cool thing about it is when you get on the field, you don't have to make it up. We're just helping extend from an American side of things what they're already doing on the ground. And I think a misconception maybe with Project 70 sometimes is the one mission trip or two mission trips, however many there are given a summer, are the only thing that happen. No, once we leave, they do many projects all year round.
Yeah.
And they're going to the next towns and they're doing what we were doing in that summer trip.
Echoing
that and allowing it to become their normative way of doing ministry around them. Absolutely. And so by the time we get back the next summer, we'll have people join the project who came to know Christ throughout the year through the mini projects that the Brazilian churches are doing.
That's wild.
And so we see this, again, I'm using this word several times, but this exponential multiplication of disciples that are being made all the way throughout the year. And then the big trip, I guess we call it the big project in the summer, gives that huge push on the flywheel, gives that momentum burst, both for us in our discipleship as Americans, but also for the Brazilian churches down there to continue what they do month in and month out. So that three-pronged stool, has been pretty effective as being one of the best missiology strategies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's generating. It's the movement. We keep things in motion, and not we. God keeps it, and we're just part of that. But the strategy, in the sense, so it's really good to see that every year we grow more people, and people are excited. one of the things that Americans is always surprised is to see churches working together, which kind of rare today, you know. Although we believe in cooperation, sometimes it's just on the paper or financially, but they really gather together, you know, to help another church or to plant a church in a place there was no church. So it's very altruistic. It's very Christian, you know. Yeah. So
when I think of spreading the kingdom here, I think of here meaning our western half of the DFW Metroplex. It seems like there are common obstacles. It could be a love of comfort, right? It could be just the entrappings of modern times, confusing Christianity with maybe some ideals of the West. But what would be some common obstacles then in these two states that Project 70 works in? What are some common obstacles to spreading the kingdom there?
Well, overall, if you go around the world, there's one big thing that's urbanization.
Okay.
The more urbanized, you know, place is more difficult. You know, the most difficult would be we've been in Seoul in South Korea, and people live in apartments. You know, they live their own lives, individualized. You know, so I guess the more community-based, you know, towns you have, the easier access, and that's a given in a sense. And of course, as a general rule, but depending on their background, their religion, you know, their culture, you're gonna face other challenges.
Okay.
So, in Brazil, in Minas, we have different states here we're talking about. So Minas Gerais is a very Roman Catholic state. And so we face a lot of idolatry. You know, people have this misconception about Christianity. So sometimes they...
when he says idolatry, he means you're driving down the road and people are bowing down to a statue on the side of the road of Mary or of the local saint or whoever that is. It's literal.
And although it's called, you know, is a Christian in the general sense, but the centrality of Christ is really not, you know, in their faith. And so there's a big need for that. In the South, we start facing already some of the American things, the European things, because they tend to be more wealthy, you know, they have more, and sometimes it's just materialism, and, you know, but God has, I mean, we have so much success in that, you know, raising leaders and planting churches, and I'm always looking at the good side, and I think we are very, you know, God has been amazing to accomplish this task of planting churches and all.
You know, Jairo's talked about, it's a phrase he came up with. I attribute it to you, not to me, but the idea of the edge of the kingdom. And
I don't even know who
said that. I think you said that to me at some. I always cite you.
Amen.
So there you go. But the idea of the edge of the kingdom.
Waiting on that royalty check.
It's not coming.
I don't know.
Keep waiting, brother. But the way that I would describe the edge of the kingdom is that point where light meets darkness.
Oh yeah.
Right. So the edge of the kingdom could be here in Weatherford, Parker County, Fort Worth, Dallas, Fort Worth, whatever. But when you get, as Americans, go to another country, and you go into a country that has a state religion, or you go into a country that is politically corrupt, or you go into a setting where there is jealousy and there's rivalry among churches, and you're going there for a kingdom purpose, and you see that point of collision where light meets the darkness, that's the edge of the kingdom. And that's when everything is transformed.
Yeah.
That's when the person going is transformed, where the churches there are transformed, where the people who are far from God are transformed.
Yeah.
And there is spiritual warfare that happens because of that collision, to the point where, I mean, we could tell story after story. We don't have time to do that, but I remember in San Francisco, Minas. Yeah. So in Minas Gerais, kind of a western town in that state. It's on the San Francisco River.
Okay.
And we went into that town, and the mayor was the former priest.
Okay.
And now he was practicing a homosexual lifestyle. And he heard we were coming in and sent a letter to all the Catholics in town saying, don't go to the Baptist thing.
Okay.
Right?
All of a sudden, they have masses every day.
They have masses every day now, multiple hours, whatever, with the threat of their land and homes being taken. Because if they had joined the Catholic Church there, they were granted that privilege, right? So now the hooks are in.
Yeah.
So we tried to get an audience with the mayor, never got one, but we did get one with the vice mayor to prove that we weren't, well, at least most of us weren't out of our minds.
Yeah.
And that we weren't crazy people, right? But we always meet with the local leaders.
Yeah.
And we take the local Baptist pastor with us to show them this isn't some weird thing.
Yeah.
We love Jesus. And it's amazing what God does during some of those meetings, to the point, I don't know, we had 300 to 400 or 500 people get saved.
Wow.
In the 3 days that we're in that town. But all of a sudden, when you hear that or you see that light meet the darkness, and there are 1,000 examples of it.
Yeah.
But that's just one. You say, okay, something's going to give here. Well, theologically, biblically, light always penetrates the darkness. And so our call is not to get scared of the darkness and allow it to push us back, but to penetrate it.
Yeah.
And to bring light to the darkest places in that city and watch God move. And you know what? Sometimes doors have been slammed in our face. That's fine. We just kick the dust off and keep going. And that is the transformative aspect, I think, of going into those dark places like we do when we go.
Yeah, it's the best place to be.
Yeah.
And, there's another aspect that is what we call the inside job, because we have people from all ages and all maturity levels, Christian maturity levels, right? So when they dress, they put on the shirt. We use like a camel shirt. That's why we use the colors. It's based on.
Talk about the 7 different colors and what.
Well,
that
we like the vision of the throne in Revelation. God sending His 7 spirits to the earth. Like that talks about completion and full work well done. Overall. So we have ministry that we cover all the possible areas. Right, the towns are taken by our presence there, because
it's almost like an army going into the town. I mean, we'll have 200 to 300.
We had
300 this past summer on a team going into a small town.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore that.
It's hard to ignore that when they're all in different color camo shirts. People want to know what's going on.
They go to schools. They do visits. They are on the streets. They are on the central square. They are in high schools. They are on the radio. So all of a sudden, what's going on? We're taken by surprise. And this is why we have the 7 colors, the 7,
they represent each ministry team. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: the inside job, and that's what we were able to see. Is there are that preteen. You have that preteen or that teenager, or even sometimes kids. You wouldn't believe. Kids that are watching you. And they are growing inside that powerful manifestation of the kingdom. And as a pastor, this is really important, I think, for us, is that they are not ashamed of the gospel. They actually are able to see the power of the gospel. So they are in the winning side of sorts. You understand that?
Yes.
So I really hate when we Christians, we try to do things that we are just being beaten up, when you do evangelism or something. Why it needs to be like that? And why you need to be just suffering for Christ when you're preaching the gospel. Let's do it in a powerful way. Let's take this thing, all over. And that's what we see God is using us in a mighty way. And so those kids, they think of the kingdom not as a boring or thing that they want to be part of, something that they don't want to be part of, but something that, man, this is cool.
Yeah.
I can talk about Jesus. I can present the gospel. I like this shirt. I love it. I love the gospel. I love, the music. I love, everything for me makes sense. You know? So I'm not saying that we need to be cool in order to be Christians, but I would say that we don't need to be uncool to be Christians. Does that make sense? Help me out, Jim. I mean, you understand what I'm saying, right?
I think I just live in an uncool world, so I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, and you're talking about being cool to just a generic middle-aged pastor. Me, not my boss.
Do you understand?
But what I'm hearing, though, is there is presenting the gospel is an exciting thing because it is light penetrating darkness. Yeah. It is eternal work. So we should be excited about the things that are exciting in our belief system that we claim to believe.
Amen.
But at the same time, there is a way to present it that doesn't compromise the integrity, but does at a minimum make it palatable to someone else. Like I don't have to appear or present awkward for the sake of being awkward. I can take 30 seconds and make sure that at least I have a chance to talk to you, right? If I'm approaching this in a way that's repulsive from the beginning, I'm just making it more difficult for
Well, it
myself.
speaks into that idea of being winsome for the gospel.
Yes.
That the gospel is both confrontational and attractive at the same time. It confronts us in our sin. It confronts us in our apathy. It confronts us in our frailty as a human being. But it's winsome. It draws us. Jesus draws us to himself, right? And so the idea that believers should act in the same way, it should be what disciple making is all about, that we're actually looking like Jesus in how we present Jesus. And I think a point you made, Andy, just a second ago is not only to have that in a ministry philosophy or some type of concept, but to actually put hands and feet to it.
Yeah.
And that's when they get on the ground in a situation like this, that it's, for most Americans, it's way out of our comfort zone. And yet the teams allow you to use your gifting and apply what you do already know. And then you hit the darkness and it helps you to grow because you are forced to grow, to be the people that God's called you to be.
One more question that I have before we wrap up this specific episode. Y'all are a part of, and when I say y'all, Project 70, you're planting churches, and you have churches that are planting churches. For a local church that is partnered with Project 70, what are some of your, Jairos, what are some of your end goals for that church? Or what are some milestones that you say, hey, when you hit that marker, we know that you are growing and maturing in Christ?
Well, the greatest mark is for them to reproduce into another church.
Okay.
Right? So we want to see granddaughters and great-granddaughters, or several of those. So this is, if they have the mentality of church planting from early on in their lives, if they're already branching out to other communities. And in the mission field, Jim was talking about this, the ends of the world, like Jesus' end of the earth.
End of the earth.
Yeah. To me, I have a very simple definition. When you get your car and you start driving, and you drive, you go to a smaller town, then an even smaller town, or then you don't have a town, you just have some houses, but there's still a road.
Isn't that where you grew up?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So it's where the road ends.
Yes.
So you have ends of the earth all over the earth.
Yeah.
You have here in Weatherford, places where that's the end, because if you don't go there, nobody will.
Absolutely.
So that's very important, because when you plant a church, for instance, in a municipality, in Brazil, every land belongs to a municipality.
Okay.
You have districts, they are smaller, you have communities, and you have sometimes just small gatherings. And this is very challenging, because a church needs to be, like a local church, they have a lot of work to do. They have satellite, mission churches. They have other municipalities. So if they don't have the kingdom mentality, branching out for them, it's going to be hard. But if they do, from day one, they already be willing to reach those ends of the earth, places. So this is the marker. This is really the mentality that we are looking for.
Okay. And to clarify, when you're saying churches that have daughters and granddaughters and great-granddaughters, I know what you're talking about, but just to clarify, you're speaking of a church's granddaughter would be what?
Well, a church that was planted,
and then
that started and planted on a different.
So each church producing an additional
by
church,
themselves,
not next door, but in the next municipality
going to a
or
different
next district.
municipality.
Absolutely.
And you can see that we are Baptists, so we don't have bishops like we just have pastors, right?
Yes.
But we do have churches that take a lot of responsibility regionally, and we do have leaders that are like episcopals. They have the regional mentality. Jim has, several of those guys in Brazil. Right. They are pastors, but they think broadly. They don't think.
And they pastor pastors.
Absolutely.
In that region. Yeah.
So he raises up leader. He has the mentality to start other churches. So those guys are really key to that too.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us this time on Every Gen. My name is Andy Brady, and be sure to subscribe to us. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please make sure to have your downloads preset for us. Thank you.